I'm Tracy Osborne, and you're listening to the Daring Woman podcast. Imagine the story of a generation being altered by women who were empowered to live their truth and in turn can empower others to live theirs. It's time to rewrite the narrative. So when I was 19, I decided that I was going to get married and I wanted to have a baby. Well, not quite in that order. I had actually decided I wanted a baby first. And when I met my first husband, he knew the day we met that I wanted to get pregnant, and I didn't care if he was involved or not in the raising of the child anyway. That I was baby hungry. My friends had babies, and they just made it look like the coolest thing in the world. My guest today shares a sort of a similar story. We were both pregnant at the same age, but that's where our stories differ, or that's where our stories stop being similar. Hers went a whole different path, and I'm going to let her talk to you about that today and tell us about her journey. So Allyson Roberts, thank you so much for joining us on the Daring Woman podcast today.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for having me on here.
So I know, being 19 and pregnant is exciting but scary. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your story and what path you went down?
So I was actually engaged to be married, and it was about 7 weeks out from our actual wedding date, and I failed a pregnancy test. And my fiance was over the moon happy, and we were so ecstatic. And we were celebrating, and then he was really controlled by his family, and he just felt like, even though I wasn't going to be showing and no one would have any clue that I was pregnant, he made the decision to go ahead and tell his dad that I was pregnant. And his dad wrote a check and basically threw it at me and told me that I was going to have an abortion if I was going to marry his son. Now, I want to make something really clear. I am not, a big pro-lifer. It's just that for me, I couldn't go through it. I just couldn't do it because, our baby was conceived in love, and it wasn't a mistake to me or an accident. So,
right.
So anyway, I went to the abortion clinic, and I couldn't go through with it. And I went home, and I didn't tell my fiance that I hadn't had the abortion. And the next morning I woke up, and of course I still had morning sickness. And he was like, just let me talk to my dad. It's going to be okay. And so I went ahead and I went to class. I was in college at the time. And I came home, and they had changed the locks on the doors. So they had my stuff outside. So I loaded up my car with my stuff, and I went back to my mom's house, and she was not the best person in the world. So
yeah.
Anyway, I went back to her house, and I didn't tell her I was pregnant. I got through the holidays, and then I had to tell her that I was expecting. And so when I did, she put cash in my hand and told me that if I wanted to stay in the house, that I had to go and have an abortion.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I was just like, I've already been down that road, and I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, okay, that's fine. We'll figure something out. And so, again, I went to class, and I came home, and she had changed the locks on the door. So I ended up living in my car for 3 weeks, just trying to figure out, what I was going to do. And a professor of ours had given us the Napoleon Hill book, Think and Grow Rich. And in my car every single night, I was, reading that book and just really trying to visualize a life that was better for myself. And so on the 20th day, I was really at my wit's end, and I was about to give up, and just, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't go to class anymore. And I couldn't live in my car anymore. And so I just was kind of in my car, and I just said, God, I've been following everything that you told me to do. And I don't know what you want me to do. And I sort of drifted off to sleep, and I woke up to banging on my window, and it was the professor who had given us the Think and Grow Rich book. And he had been watching me, and it was freezing. A lot of people don't think that it gets cold in Georgia, but it does. It was freezing cold. And
yeah, it gets cold in Georgia.
It gets very cold in Georgia. And as a matter of fact, that particular winter, it was a record cold year for us. So he was like, Allyson, you can't stay in this car anymore. And I was like, I know. And he said, just, I've told my wife what's going on. She's prepared, a bed for you. You can't stay with us forever, but you can stay with us a couple of nights until we figure something out. And so I stayed with them for a couple of days. They convinced me to drop out of school, which I did. They put me in touch with Catholic Social Services, and I went through with my pregnancy with them, and I ended up placing my son for adoption. But at the very last minute, I wasn't going to do it, and I just couldn't do it. And so I was on my hospital floor, just prostrate on the floor, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. And I heard this voice say to me, if you sign the adoption papers, you'll see him again, which would have been an absolute miracle, because at the time, Georgia adoption was sealed and closed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one knew anything about each other.
Right.
So I signed the papers, and then 24 years later, I was woken up in the middle of the night by that same voice, and I started the process of finding my son. And when I faxed the paperwork in, the social worker called me, and she said, Allyson, I just want to set you up, that this may never happen. And I said, I understand that. And she said, we'll be in touch with you. Just, you can check in with us periodically every few months, and we'll just, we'll give you an update on whatever we have. And she called me the very next day, because my son and I faxed our paperwork in at the exact same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And we were standing in front of each other 4 days later.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so awesome that you were able to reconnect with him.
Yes. Yes.
As a mom, number one, I cannot even begin to imagine the struggle that you had to go through to make the decision to give him up, knowing that it was for the best thing for him. I just I can't imagine how tough and how heart-wrenching that had to have been for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, they had to medicate me because I was screaming like a crazy person.
Right.
When they came to my room, with the wheelchair, and it took about, I don't know, 5 or 6 times to actually get me into the wheelchair and get me actually out of the hospital, because I was just devastated.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I can't. And the other thing that just floors me, and I've heard about it over the years. I've seen it when I was in high school, but these pregnant girls who come home and are kicked out because they got pregnant. And I just, as a parent, number one, that is the time when your baby needs you the most. Yeah, they screwed up and they got pregnant, but they don't need your shutting the door in their face. That's when they need your love and support the most. And number two, that's your freaking grandbaby.
Right.
both,
Right.
on both sides. That's their grandbaby that your mom and his dad wanted to kill. And that just, I just cannot wrap my head around that. I absolutely can't.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that my daughter, who's 27, she had my grandson 10 months ago, and so I feel like life has given me sort of a second chance, because I see him every single day, and when I just watched them together, and the joy that I felt when she told me, and she's married, and an adult. But I mean, even if she had told me, at 16 or 17 that she was pregnant, and definitely at 19, almost 20, I can't imagine being anything other than supportive.
Yeah. Yeah. My oldest is 27, and she had my first grandbaby when she was 21. So 20, 21. It was like a month or two before she turned 21, I think. Um, and yeah, they weren't married, but they'd been together since high school, since
Right.
like sophomore year. And they were together for about 11 years before they actually ended up splitting up. And so, I've got two beautiful granddaughters, and they are the light of my life, the absolute light of my life. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's interesting that, there's so much shame,
mhm,
um, that was attached to my pregnancy with my son.
mhm,
Um, and for years, I battled with that shame, and I always knew that I had done the right thing,
mhm,
for him. But then, having to date after that and explain, to guys that, that I had placed a child for adoption, and just to relive it all the time with all of
mhm.
these guys who are, you know, wanted a 21-year-old to have the body that a 21-year-old has before she gives birth to a child. And, just to go through all of the shame, that was attached to it. And I think that, the big lesson is love. That's
Yeah,
that's that's the big lesson, because, um, and I don't regret any part of it at all. It's made me the woman that I am. But and at the same time, it's like, man, it could have been a much different path. Of course, I wouldn't have my daughter now, and I wouldn't have my grandson now. Life would have taken a completely different turn. But it's amazing to me, like you said, how, all of a sudden this person that is your child, that's doing quote unquote all the right things, can suddenly just become this person that you don't want to have anything else to do with ever again because they're pregnant.
right. They're pregnant, or they're gay, or they're trans, or they're,
Yes.
they don't fit into societal norms. And so, um, yeah, I will never understand that. Yeah, that's just something I will never be able to wrap my head around. Um, I mean, my kids can do just about anything, and I will never stop loving them. I mean, God
Right.
forbid they become a serial killer or something. I would turn their asses into the cops, and
Right.
but I would still love them. Um, they're my kids first and foremost, and that's just the way it is. But so I can imagine you must have had you had a long road to forgiveness and healing
Yes.
ahead of you. How did you travel that road? What did that look like for you?
Well, the good news, and thank God for it, because, it kept me sane, and I've built an entire career around it. But, I'm intuitive. I um, I was born with these intuitive gifts of, clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience. So, I always felt the presence of angels around me. I've always known, that I was more than my circumstances. And at the end of every single day before I went to sleep for years and years and years, I would actually say that out loud. I am more than my circumstances. And it's just, growing up in the South, to say I am psychic was not something that was
not down here in the Bible.
Readily. Yes. People weren't like lining up to publicly announce that they were seeing me. But privately, I had an amazing, thriving business behind the scenes. And so I really, Tracy, I dove into real estate as my sort of, skirt career, the career that was acceptable by everyone.
Right.
And then behind the curtain, for the past 20 years, I've had a pretty amazing intuitive business. And finally, the South is waking up a little bit. So I publicly pronounce that I'm an intuitive life coach now. But that's really what kept me going. And a huge support group of women that I built around myself for a long time of just love and acceptance, compassion, understanding. Women can be really, really mean, and women can be really, really amazing. So I just surrounded myself with amazing women and did a lot of, little girl healing, because I grew up in an abusive household. My dad basically wasn't present at all. And when he was, there was no emotional connection. And then my mom is just addicted to rage. I mean, that's just really the only way to really describe it. And so, my sister and I are, I don't know where we came from. We are nothing like them. I think it was just my grandmother's presence in our lives to give us, some sanity. But even with that sanity, my sister and I both had to dig in really, really deep and just go in and heal a lot of our childhood issues and wounds.
Wow. I mean, it's good that you and your sister were able to kind of break that mold, because I'm sure, your parents' behavior is kind of passed down, as so much of our behaviors are. We learn from our parents. So it's good that you were able to break that mold. Now, you found your son, and I want to know a little bit about this. So, 4 days later, you were standing in front of him. What happened?
Yeah. So he was born with a pretty severe issue with his feet. And so he's actually had 17 surgeries.
Oh.
Yeah. So the very first thing, it was just great to see, a 24-year-old standing in front of me, because I was never quite sure if that was even going to be the case for him. And then a few months after that, I was sitting next to his parents, watching him get married. And that was the whole reason that he wanted to find me, was for me to be at his wedding. And it was phenomenal.
Did you bawl your eyes out?
I wanted to. I really, I wanted to. I cried for a solid day before. I just was like, okay, I've got to get this out of my system,
right
before, because I really wanted it to be, about him and not, but if I hadn't had that solid day of crying beforehand, I would have been a mess at the wedding.
I hear you. My second daughter got married last year, and I was a mess. I was a complete mess. But,
yeah, and his family is so sweet, and his wife is so precious. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
And
fantastic that his parents were okay with him reaching out to you. And for them to even just, let him know that he was adopted. Um, so many parents don't choose that route. So the fact that they were open with him is amazing in and of itself. And to be sitting next to them watching him get married, wow, that had to just be um, surreal.
well, and it's really interesting because so on my son's birth certificate, his name is Brian, but his parents named him David. And so my son's mom is a birth mother. So when she was 18, she placed a son for adoption, and then she was never able to get pregnant again.
Mm,
And she found him, she reunited with him, and his parents named him David. And she had no idea. Like, she reconnected with him after,
right.
um, she didn't know what that had happened. So it's all these like little God moments, that we all
Sure.
shared together. And I think it just really brought us closer. And I really feel in my heart that that's why she told both of her kids that they're adopted, is because she went through that. So,
Right.
yeah, she just had a deeper compassion for me, and a deeper understanding of why they needed to know that.
Wow, that's incredible. So for those that are out there listening, um, that maybe, kind of going down something similar, maybe they are pregnant now and thinking of giving it up, or they've given up their baby, or whatever the case may be. um, what kind of advice can you offer them to just reassure them that whatever their decision is will be the right one?
The thing that I would say is, well, for the person who's pregnant, um, and trying to navigate through their decision, um, don't listen to anybody else. Don't listen to the people who are saying to
Yeah.
place your baby. Don't listen to the people who are saying to keep your baby. The decision has to be your own.
Right.
And the only way to get to that decision is to turn off the outside noise and to really go within. I mean, I would spend hours a day meditating on not only what my life was going to look like without him, but what his life was going to look like without me. And then I would meditate on what my life was going to look like with him and what his life was going to look like with me. And it is the only way that I was able to come to the best decision for him. And that's the other thing that I would say is you have to make the decision for your child, not for yourself.
Right.
And that's hard to do. It's easy to say. It's really, really, really tough to do.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I know that one of my family members um, became a teen mom, and she made the decision. Well, she was torn. Do I keep it? Do I give it up? And ultimately, she ended up giving the baby up, and one of her cousins ended up adopting the baby. So at least we were able to keep the baby in the family, but it was a gut-wrenching decision for her. you know
Yes.
so fortunately, that is something that I don't have experience with. But it yeah, I mean, it just sounds like that by listening to your inner self, uh, you were able to create the right decisions on the right path for both of you to walk down.
Yes. Um, and, if you placed your child for adoption and you're sitting here listening, going, oh my God, I placed my son because my parents told me I had to, or I placed my son, you know, for whatever reason.
Right.
I just want to say that even if you feel like it wasn't your decision, I am a true believer that everything in life happens for a reason. I really believe that with my whole soul.
I do too.
And yeah, I really honestly do. So the thing that I would say to someone who is regretting it or second guessing, or in mourning or whatever, I would say that it's time to focus on your pain and start to heal it, because you're the most important person in the world. And we need women. We need women and men too, but primarily right now, I mean, I'm going to focus on women because
absolutely. That's who we're
but we
talking
need
to.
women. Yes, exactly. We need women to turn inward and start to focus more on themselves, putting the oxygen mask on their face first, because so many women empty themselves out and they don't have anything left for themselves at the end of the day, at the end of their life.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show, on the website, in the magazine. we
Right.
definitely talk about self-care and taking care of yourself first. So that has to be number one, because if you're not healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, you're not going to be able to be there for those that you care about. So that is incredibly
Exactly.
Allyson, thank you so much for coming on and, giving us a little bit about your story, and, just letting us know that there is hope, that there is light after adoption. And, that there are options out there. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. It's something that's really near and dear to my heart. So thank you for giving me the space to share it.
It's been my pleasure. Ladies, for those of you listening, if you're in this kind of a position where, maybe you're pregnant and not sure what to do, or you've given up a baby and not sure what to do, or you're a parent of somebody who's pregnant and not sure what to do, listen to your inner self. The answers you seek are definitely within you. Just as Allyson said, you have to shut out that external noise so that you can listen and hear that internal voice giving you the guidance and love and support that you need. So thank you for tuning in, and we will definitely talk to you on our next show.